Think about the most powerful person you have ever been in a room with. Not necessarily the loudest. Not the one doing the most talking. Not the one who kept reminding everyone of their title, their accomplishments, or their opinions. Think carefully, because the person who likely comes to mind was probably someone who spoke little, moved with ease, and carried something in their energy that you could feel the moment they walked in. You did not need them to explain themselves. You just knew. That is not a coincidence. That is quiet confidence, and it is one of the rarest, most magnetic, and most misunderstood forces in all of human interaction. Most people spend their entire lives chasing respect in the wrong direction. They talk more. They try to look more impressive. They perform. They push. They argue louder, dress flashier, drop bigger names, and yet the respect they so desperately want continues to slip through their fingers. Because what they do not understand is that real, deep, lasting respect cannot be demanded. It cannot be talked into existence. It is felt. It is earned in silence. It lives in the way you carry yourself before you ever open your mouth. This is what this journey is about. Not tricks, not manipulation, not a performance you put on for other people. This is about building something real inside of you that radiates outward without you ever having to announce it. Because when you truly have it, when you develop the kind of quiet confidence that commands rooms and changes how people treat you, the world will begin to respond to you in ways that words alone never could have made possible. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Myth of Loud Confidence. We live in a world that has completely misunderstood what confidence actually looks like. From the time we are young, we are shown a very specific version of it. The hero who speaks first and speaks the loudest. The leader who takes up the most space in every conversation. The person who has a sharp comeback for everything, who never backs down, who declares their value loudly and often. We see this version of confidence in movies, in social media, in the people who seem to dominate every room they walk into. And so we come to believe a dangerous lie that confidence is loud, that it announces itself, that if you are not projecting, if you are not asserting, if you are not being vocal about your worth, then you must not have much worth at all. That belief has destroyed more people than any external failure ever could. Here is the truth that most people never figure out. The loudest person in the room is almost never the most powerful. Loudness is almost always a symptom of insecurity. When someone feels the need to dominate every conversation, it is because silence terrifies them. Silence means they might be overlooked. And being overlooked means to them that they do not matter. So they fill every quiet moment with noise. They interrupt. They exaggerate. They perform not from a position of strength but from a deep-seated fear that if they stop talking, people will forget they are there. Watch this in real life and you will start to see it everywhere. The person at a dinner table who will not let anyone else finish a sentence. The colleague who turns every meeting into a stage for their opinions. The individual on social media who posts about their success every single day. Who needs the world to constantly see and validate them. These are not confident people. These are people terrified of being invisible. Their noise is a mask and the people around them sense it. Even if they cannot name it, real confidence does not need to announce itself. This is perhaps the single most important idea in this entire journey. When you are truly secure in who you are, you do not need the room to acknowledge it at every moment. You do not need to remind people of your value. You do not need constant feedback from the outside world to feel okay on the inside. You already know what you bring. And that knowing is so solid, so settled that it just sits there quietly underneath everything you do. And because it does not scream for attention, because it does not push or perform or beg to be seen, people feel it is something rare, something real, something trustworthy. Think about the most respected figures in history. Think about the leaders, thinkers, and human beings who left the deepest marks on the world around them. Very few of them were known for being the loudest voice in the room. What they were known for was their stillness, their deliberateness, their ability to say something important when it needed to be said, and to say nothing at all when nothing needed to be said. That restraint, that ability to be fully present without needing to fill every inch of space with themselves, is not passivity. It is one of the highest expressions of power. There is also a deeply biological reason why loud confidence fails at creating genuine respect. Human beings, like all social animals, have finely tuned instincts for detecting threat and detecting safety. When someone comes at you with loud, dominant energy designed to impress or intimidate, something in your body registers it as a kind of aggression. Your defenses go up even subtly. You may smile and nod, but something inside you is wary. Contrast this with the experience of being around someone who is calm, grounded, and completely secure in themselves. Your nervous system reads that as safety. You relax. You open up. You trust them. You lean toward them. And that leaning, that openness is the biological foundation of deep respect. This is why quiet confidence is not just more admirable. It is more effective. It does not create weariness in others. It creates trust. And trust at its foundation is what all genuine respect is actually built on. So the first thing you must do on this journey is to unlearn everything you have been taught about what confidence looks like. You must stop performing confidence and start building it, because the performance will never work in the long run. People are too smart, too perceptive, too tuned into the difference between something real and something staged. The world is full of performers. What it is starving for are the real ones. The ones who do not need to convince anyone of their worth because they are too busy living it. And that starts always on the inside. Most people try to build their confidence by changing how the outside world responds to them. They seek out praise. They collect accomplishments and display them. They dress for the room. They train themselves to say the right things in the right situations, and all of that is understandable. But it is also backwards, because real confidence is not the result of being praised. Real confidence is built in the moments when there is no applause. In the decisions you make when nobody is watching. In the way you treat yourself when you are alone. In the dark with nothing to perform for and nobody to impress. That is where it lives. And when it is built there, it cannot be shaken by the absence of external validation, because it was never dependent on it in the first place. The person who has built their confidence from the inside out walks differently through the world. They move without urgency. They speak without desperation. They listen without thinking about what to say next. They disagree without needing to win. They can be criticized without crumbling or overcorrecting. Not because they are unfailing, but because their foundation is deep enough that the turbulence of other people's opinions cannot knock them off of it. That is what we are building here. And it begins with dismantling the myth that confidence needs to be loud. Quiet is not weakness. Quiet is what power sounds like when it has nothing left to prove. Chapter 2. The presence that commands without speaking. Before you say a single word to a person, before you make eye contact, before you extend a hand for a greeting, something has already been communicated. Your presence has entered the room before you consciously decided to do anything at all. And that presence, the invisible energy field you carry into every space, is doing more social work than most people realize. Presence is not about being tall or attractive or well-dressed, though those things can play a role in first impressions. Presence is something much deeper and much more difficult to fake. It is the feeling you leave in a room simply by being in it. And while it might seem like something people either have or do not have, the truth is that presence is something you develop. It is built by how you think about yourself, how you occupy your own body, and most critically how you relate to the environment around you. The single most powerful thing that creates immediate commanding presence is groundedness. When you walk into a space and you are not scrambling internally, not calculating how you are being perceived, not running the anxious mental loop of "do they like me, do I look okay? Am I saying the right things?" You carry a quality of settledness that other people can feel in an almost physical way. There is a stillness to you, a stability. And in a world where most people are quietly frantic on the inside, that stillness reads as power, Think about what it feels like to be in the presence of someone who is not thinking about themselves at all. Someone who is simply fully completely there. Not performing for you. Not managing your impression of them, not selling you on anything, just present. When you encounter that quality in another person, something in you responds to it immediately. You feel seen. You feel safe. You find yourself trusting them before they have even demonstrated anything trustworthy. That is the power of pure presence, and it is the foundation of all quiet confidence. Most people will never develop this because most people spend the majority of their social interactions inside their own heads. They are rehearsing what they are about to say while the other person is still talking. They are monitoring their own facial expressions. They are wondering what the group thinks of them. They are in two places at once, partly in the room and partly in the anxious theater of their own self-consciousness. And the result is that they are never fully anywhere. And people feel that absence. It registers as disconnection, as inauthenticity, as something slightly off, even if they cannot articulate exactly what it is. Developing true presence means making the radical decision to stop managing how you appear and to start inhabiting the moment you are in. This is easier said than done because the self-monitoring mechanism is deeply ingrained. For most people, it has been running since childhood. Since the first time they were evaluated, judged, or made to feel that fitting in required careful management of how they presented themselves to the world. Undoing that conditioning takes consistent, deliberate practice. One of the most effective places to begin is with your breathing. It sounds almost too simple to matter. But the connection between the breath and the nervous system is one of the most powerful tools available to you. When you are in a state of low-grade anxiety, which is what social self-consciousness often is, your breathing becomes shallow, quick, and high in the chest. This keeps your nervous system in a mild but persistent state of alertness. It makes you feel slightly unsettled, slightly scattered. And that internal unsteadiness shows up in your presence as a kind of jitteriness that others can detect. Slowing your breath down, breathing deeply into your belly, tells your nervous system that there is no threat, that you are safe. And when your nervous system receives that signal, everything about you changes. Your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, your eyes soften, your movements slow and become more deliberate. You land in your body. And that landing, that moment of actually arriving into your own physical self, is when your presence becomes something real and undeniable. There is something else that creates commanding presence that almost nobody talks about. The willingness to take up space, not aggressively, not in a way that crowds others out, but in the simple, honest sense of allowing yourself to actually exist in the room you are in. Many people shrink themselves. They make themselves physically smaller. Hunched shoulders, crossed arms, weight shifted to one side, a posture that seems to be apologizing for occupying space. And that apology, that constant miniaturization of the self, communicates to everyone around them that they do not fully believe they belong there. Quiet confidence is the opposite of this. It is the quiet declaration made through posture and movement and the simple act of occupying your body fully that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. You do not need to fill the room. You do not need to dominate it. You simply need to be in it completely and unapologetically. Another dimension of powerful presence is the quality of your attention. Where you put your focus tells everyone in the room something about who you are. People who are insecure tend to scan. Their eyes move around the room, checking exits, checking reactions, checking to see who is watching them. Their attention is restless because their need for reassurance is constant. But the person with a truly grounded presence gives their attention fully, completely to whatever or whoever is in front of them. And that quality of focused, unhurried attention is one of the rarest and most attractive things one human being can offer another. When you are talking to someone and they have your complete attention, not fragmented attention, not distracted attention, but the full undivided experience of another person being genuinely interested in what you are saying. It is a profound experience. It makes you feel important. It makes you feel valued. And the person giving you that attention does not have to say a single word about their own worth. Their ability to give you that quality of focus communicates their worth without words. This is what people mean when they say that someone has presence. They do not mean that the person is flashy or dramatic or loud. They mean that when this person is with you, they are with you fully. And there is nothing quite as powerful or quite as rare as that. Chapter 3. The Power of Stillness. In a culture that glorifies busyness, noise, reaction, and constant stimulation, stillness has become one of the most subversive and powerful qualities a person can possess. We live in a world where people fidget through silences, compulsively reach for their phones the moment a conversation pauses, and interpret the absence of activity as a problem to be solved. And because this frantic energy is so normal, so expected, so universal, the person who can simply be still stands out in a way that is almost startling. Stillness is not blankness. It is not detachment or indifference. Stillness is a kind of concentrated, grounded aliveness. It is the state of being completely present without needing to do anything with that presence. And it is one of the core signatures of quiet confidence because it communicates something that no amount of words can say as clearly. I am not afraid of this moment. I do not need to manage it, escape it, or fill it with noise. I am comfortable here. This matters more than most people understand because discomfort with stillness is almost always a symptom of inner insecurity. The person who cannot sit quietly in their own presence, who needs constant stimulation or validation or distraction, is broadcasting their anxiety whether they intend to or not. And people around them pick that up. It registers as a kind of instability, a lack of groundedness that subtly undermines trust and respect even when everything they are saying sounds right. Contrast this with the person who can sit in silence without needing to break it. Who can hold steady without looking away, who can receive difficult news or hear an argument or face a tense moment without immediately reacting. There is a kind of solidity to them that feels almost rare in today's world. Like meeting a tree in the middle of a storm. Everything around it is moving and it just stands. That quality, that unshakable rootedness is what people associate with wisdom, with strength, with the kind of authority that does not need to be announced. This is why in negotiation, the strategic use of silence is one of the most powerful tools available. Most people experience silence as pressure and will immediately move to fill it, often giving away more than they intended. The person who can simply remain in silence, who is not threatened by the pause, who does not feel the need to rush in with reassurances or concessions or more words, holds enormous psychological power in those moments. The silence does not belong to the person who needs to break it. It belongs to the person who can hold it. And the person who holds it calmly and without urgency is understood by everyone present to be the one with the least to lose. But the power of stillness extends far beyond strategic moments. Think about what it means to be truly still while someone is talking to you. Not planning your response, not scanning the room, not mentally reviewing your to-do list or composing the next thing you want to say. Just completely quietly present with the other person and what they are expressing. This quality of listening, which is becoming increasingly rare, does something profound to the person on the receiving end. They feel genuinely heard, and feeling heard is one of the deepest human needs there is. When you give someone that experience, when your stillness creates a space in which they feel truly received, they trust you immediately. They feel safe with you and they will remember that long after they have forgotten anything you said. Stillness also changes how your words land when you do speak. There is an enormous difference between someone who speaks in a rush, who layers words on top of words, who seems to be outrunning their own thoughts, and someone who pauses, who takes a moment before responding, who chooses their words with care and delivers them with composure. The second person's words carry weight. They carry authority not because of the words themselves necessarily, but because of the quality of deliberateness behind them. When you are not in a hurry to speak, what you say feels considered. It feels intentional, and people listen to intentional speech in a way they simply do not listen to compulsive speech. There is also a neurological dimension to this worth understanding. When you are in a state of high agitation, your brain's stress response is active. Your thinking is narrower. Your creativity is reduced. Your ability to read the room accurately is diminished. Everything speeds up in ways that look like engagement, but are actually the opposite of it. But when you are still, when your nervous system is calm and regulated, the opposite happens. You become more perceptive. You process more of what is happening around you. You find words more easily and choose them more wisely. Your timing improves. You become in every measurable sense more effective. Not despite your stillness, because of it. Developing stillness requires first and foremost getting comfortable with yourself. Because the reason most people cannot be still is that stillness leaves them alone with their own mind. And their own mind is not always a comfortable place to be. The internal critic. The swirl of unresolved anxieties and insecurities and self-doubt becomes very audible in the absence of noise. And rather than face it, most people keep moving, keep filling, keep distracting. But here is the paradox. The more you avoid that discomfort, the larger it grows. The more you silence your silence, the more power that internal noise holds over you. The people who have done the work of sitting with themselves, of learning to be present with their own experience without needing to escape it, those are the people who can be still in the world. And that stillness, that unflappable, grounded, rooted quality is one of the most powerful things another person can witness in you. Begin practicing stillness in small, deliberate ways. When someone is talking to you, resist the urge to respond immediately. Let a breath pass first. When a conversation pauses, do not rush to fill it. Sit in the pause and see what it does. When you are waiting for something, leave your phone in your pocket and just be where you are. These are not dramatic interventions, but they are over time the training that builds the kind of inner stillness that shows up in your presence as something other people experience as almost magnetic. You do not have to say a word. The stillness says it for you. Chapter 4. Eye contact. The silent language of respect. Of all the nonverbal signals available to a human being, eye contact may be the single most powerful. The eyes are the place where two human beings most directly and honestly connect. There is an intimacy to sustained eye contact that bypasses words entirely, that goes straight to something primal and deeply felt. And the way you use your eyes or fail to says more about your confidence, your character, and your inner world than almost anything else about you. Most people have a complicated relationship with eye contact. They either avoid it out of anxiety, looking away too quickly as if prolonged eye contact were dangerous, or they use it aggressively, trying to stare others into submission as though eye contact were a competition. Neither of these approaches creates genuine respect. One communicates insecurity and evasion. The other communicates dominance and hostility. What creates real respect is something in between. Calm, warm, steady, authentic eye contact that says, "I see you. I am here. I am not afraid to be seen." When you consistently look away during conversations, when your eyes dart around the room or drop to the floor, when someone is speaking directly to you, what you are broadcasting is unease. The other person may not consciously register it as insecurity, but they will feel it as something, a vague sense of disconnection, a subtle feeling that you are not fully trustworthy or that you do not fully trust them. Eye contact is the foundation of human trust because for thousands of years, looking away from someone meant either submission or threat. Calm, direct eye contact meant safety. It meant I am open. I have nothing to hide. I am not afraid. That biological wiring has not changed. When you hold someone's gaze calmly and steadily, something in their nervous system registers you as secure, as trustworthy, as safe. They may not be able to articulate why they trust you, why they feel so at ease in your presence, but the eyes are doing the work, silently, powerfully, without a single word. Now, there is an important distinction to make here. There is a difference between confident eye contact and aggressive staring. Confident eye contact is warm. It has softness in it. It communicates engagement and genuine interest. The gaze is steady but not fixed. Present but not predatory. It moves naturally and blinks normally. What you are not doing is blinking rapidly out of nervousness or letting your eyes flick away the moment they meet someone else's. You are simply there looking genuinely at the person in front of you. And that genuine quality, the fact that your eye contact communicates real attention rather than a performance of attention, is what makes it so powerful. One of the most significant places where eye contact shapes how people perceive you is in moments of disagreement or challenge. When someone questions you, criticizes you, or challenges something you have said, the temptation for most people is to look away, to break the gaze, to look down or to the side. And this moment, this involuntary drop of the eyes under social pressure, is one of the most legible signals of internal insecurity there is. It tells the other person on a level below words that you are uncertain, that the challenge has found a crack, that you are retreating. The person with quiet confidence does not retreat. When challenged, their gaze remains steady, not aggressive, not cold, just steady, because they are not threatened by the challenge. They can hear it, consider it, respond to it or not without needing to flinch. And that steadiness, that ability to remain calm and held under social pressure, commands a profound and immediate respect that has nothing to do with whether they win the argument. Eye contact also plays a critical role in how you listen. Most people, when they are listening to someone, let their eyes wander. They look around the room. They glance at their phone. They stare blankly at the middle distance. And the person who is speaking feels this absence acutely, even if they say nothing about it. Contrast this with the experience of speaking to someone who is looking at you. Really looking with the kind of attentive, focused gaze that says, "Your words matter to me, that I am here for what you are saying." That gaze is a gift. It is one of the most respectful things one person can offer another. And the people who give it regularly, consistently, naturally become the people that others most want to be around and most deeply trust. There is also the dimension of eye contact in groups. Many people, when speaking to more than one person, pick one person and essentially give all their eye contact to that individual, ignoring the others. Or they let their gaze drift past people rather than landing on them. The person with social intelligence moves their eye contact deliberately around the group, making each person feel included, each person feel seen, even briefly. This is not a technique. It is an expression of genuine care for the people in the room, and it feels entirely different from the manufactured, mechanical version of it. Another underappreciated power of eye contact is what it communicates during moments of appreciation or warmth. When someone does something kind for you, when someone shares something vulnerable, when a moment of real human connection occurs, the way you meet it with your eyes matters enormously. A distracted glance at that moment breaks something. But a full, warm, unhurried look, one that says, "I received that. I am here for that," says more than any words of thanks could. The eyes do not lie in the way that words can lie. People know this instinctively. They read your eyes before they read your words. They look for what your eyes say before they decide whether to believe what your mouth says. And if your eyes are evasive, restless or guarded, no amount of well-chosen words will fully compensate. But when your eyes are steady, warm and present, even ordinary words carry conviction. Even silence carries meaning. Improving your eye contact is one of the few things you can begin practicing immediately in every single conversation you have. The principle is to stay a beat longer than feels comfortable. Not uncomfortably long, not so long that it becomes a stare. Just long enough to signal that you are not afraid, that you are present, that you are willing to be seen and to see. Over time, this small shift will begin to change everything about how people experience you. They will feel heard. They will feel respected. They will feel, often without knowing why, that you are someone worth paying attention to. That is what your eyes can do before you have said a word. Chapter 5. The Art of Saying Less. There is a commonly held belief that the way to be more respected, more influential, more impressive in social situations is to say more. To share more opinions, demonstrate more knowledge, tell more stories, offer more commentary. We conflate talkativeness with intelligence, verbal output with value, and the person who speaks most with the person who matters most. And this belief, which is almost never examined, is costing millions of people the very respect they are desperately trying to earn. The truth is that words when used too freely lose their value. When you speak constantly, when you fill every pause with more words, when you offer an opinion on everything and allow no silence to stand, your words begin to blur together. People stop listening as carefully because experience has taught them that not everything you say carries weight. There is so much noise that the signal gets lost. And paradoxically, the more you talk, the less influence your talking actually has. Now, contrast this with the experience of listening to someone who speaks with genuine economy. Someone who does not talk for the sake of filling space. Someone who listens more than they speak and who when they do speak says something that matters. Their words carry a gravity that constant talkers never achieve because when they open their mouth, everyone in the room knows it is worth paying attention to. The very rarity of their speech gives it weight. You lean in, you listen, you remember what they said because it was clearly chosen, clearly considered, and clearly meant. This is the art of saying less. It is not about being mysterious or withholding or cold. It is about understanding that your words are a form of currency. When you spend them too freely, they inflate into worthlessness. When you spend them deliberately, they carry power that is entirely disproportionate to their quantity. One of the most powerful applications of this principle is in moments of conflict or challenge. Most people when challenged or criticized rush to defend themselves. They pile words on top of words offering explanation after explanation after justification after justification. And in doing so, they give away an enormous amount of social power because the volume of the defense signals the depth of the wound. Every extra word says this matters to me. Your opinion of me matters to me. I need you to understand and accept my perspective. The person with quiet confidence does something different. They hear the challenge. They consider it and then they respond with far fewer words than expected. Not because they do not have more to say, but because they do not need to say it. Because they are not on trial in their own mind because their sense of self does not depend on winning this particular exchange. And that restraint, that calm under response to what might have been a provocation, communicates more power and more security than any perfectly crafted rebuttal could. The same principle applies in ordinary conversation. When someone asks you what you do not need to give a dissertation. When someone asks your opinion, you do not need to cover every angle. When you are sharing something about yourself, you do not need to fill in every detail. There is enormous social intelligence in the incomplete sentence. In the pause that invites someone else to speak, in the answer that leaves a little mystery, a little space, a little room for the other person's imagination. People are drawn to what they cannot fully see. They lean toward the door that is slightly ajar rather than the one flung wide open. This is also why the most interesting conversationalists are almost never the ones doing the most talking. They are the ones who ask questions and then genuinely listen to the answers, who invite others into the conversation and make them feel that their words matter. Who hold back enough of themselves to create curiosity. Who give others the experience of feeling seen and heard rather than drowned out. These are the people others seek out. These are the people who are described as magnetic, as engaging, as someone you always feel good talking to, not because of what they said, but because of the quality of space they created. There is also something deeply emotionally intelligent about saying less. When the urge is to say more in arguments, in tense situations, in moments when emotions are running high, the person who can hold their tongue, who can resist the pull toward verbal escalation, holds an enormous advantage. Their composure in the face of chaos communicates an inner stability that demands respect. They demonstrate without saying so that they are not controlled by their emotions, that they are choosing their response rather than being dragged into reaction. And that quality, the capacity to be measured and deliberate when everything around you is escalating, is one of the clearest possible signals of real, deep, quiet confidence. Understanding when not to speak also requires a deeper understanding of your own motivations. Ask yourself with radical honesty why you speak when you speak. Is it because you have something genuinely valuable to add? Or is it because silence makes you nervous? Because you want people to know you are knowledgeable, Because you are afraid that if you do not fill the space, you will be overlooked because you need the room to acknowledge your presence. These are all forms of insecurity driving speech. And the people around you can feel the difference between words spoken from a place of genuine contribution and words spoken from a place of need. When you stop speaking to fill your own needs and start speaking only when you have something real to offer, everything about the way people receive you changes. Your contributions become noteworthy. Your silence becomes interesting. People begin to wonder what you are thinking. And that curiosity that pull towards someone who is not constantly giving everything away is one of the quietest and most powerful forms of influence available. There is another dimension to saying less that has to do with not explaining yourself. People who lack confidence tend to overexplain. They justify their decisions before anyone has questioned them. They preemptively defend choices they have not been criticized for. They add qualifiers and caveats and softening language to everything as if they are bracing for a challenge that has not even come. All of that over-explanation is at its root the same thing. A craving for approval, a need for the other person to sanction your choices before you feel secure in them. The quiet confidence of saying less means making your decision, standing in it, and offering no more explanation than the situation genuinely requires. Not because you are dismissive or arrogant, but because you trust yourself. You trust that you have thought it through. You do not need the room to co-sign your choices for them to be valid. And that self-trust, that internal authorization is readable. People feel it and they respect it enormously because it is something most of them do not yet have themselves. Practice this. Notice the impulse to speak and sit with it for just a moment before acting on it. Ask yourself, does this add something? Does this need to be said? Or is this just noise, just filler, just the nervous system's desire to break the silence? And when the answer is the latter, let the silence stand. Let it do its work. Because silence used with intention is not emptiness. It is weight. It is presence. It is the sound of someone who knows their own value too well to cheapen it with unnecessary words. The people who understand this principle will tell you that learning to say less was one of the most liberating and most effective changes they ever made. Not because they became quieter people, but because every word they chose to speak became truer, heavier, and more real. And in a world drowning in noise, that realness is what commands the deepest and most lasting respect of all. Chapter 6. Posture, Movement, and the Body That Speaks Before You Do. Long before you open your mouth, long before anyone in a room has heard the sound of your voice or learned anything about who you are, your body has already delivered a full report. It has told the people around you whether you are confident or anxious, whether you belong in that space or are uncertain of your right to be there, whether you are someone to lean toward or someone to overlook. And it has done all of this without your permission, without your awareness, and in many cases against your best intentions. Because your body does not lie the way words can lie. It speaks the language of your inner world with a fluency and honesty that is impossible to fake for long. This is both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that most people walk through the world entirely unconscious of what their bodies are communicating. They hunch their shoulders without knowing it. They fold their arms across their chest in moments of discomfort and wonder why people seem guarded around them. They shift their weight from foot to foot when they feel uncertain. Tap their fingers when they are nervous. Pull their chin down when they feel judged. All of these micro signals invisible to the conscious mind are being read constantly by everyone around them. The opportunity is this. When you begin to understand what your body is saying, you can begin to align it with the person you are choosing to become. Not to fake confidence, but to embody it. Because there is a deeply established connection between your physical posture and your internal emotional state that runs in both directions. Yes, your emotions shape your posture. But your posture also shapes your emotions. When you stand tall, when you breathe deeply, when you move with deliberateness and ease, your nervous system actually begins to regulate itself differently. You begin to feel more grounded, more capable, more present. The body leads and the mind follows more often than most people realize. Let us begin with posture, because posture is the single most readable physical signal a human being can emit. The way you hold your spine when you are standing or sitting says more about your relationship with yourself than almost any verbal statement could. A collapsed posture, rounded shoulders, a caved chest, a head that droops forward communicates to everyone who sees it that you are carrying a weight you cannot bear. It says on a primal and instinctive level that you are not fully inhabiting yourself, that you are shrinking from something, that there is a part of you that would rather take up less space in the world than risk the exposure of standing fully upright. Upright posture, by contrast with the spine long, the shoulders back and relaxed, the chest open and the chin level, communicates exactly the opposite. It says, I am here. I am not afraid to be seen. I am not bracing for an attack. I occupy this body, this space, this moment without apology. And this communication is not subtle. It is one of the first things people register about you, and it shapes every subsequent interaction they have with you before you have spoken a single word. It is critical, however, to understand the difference between genuine upright posture and puffed-up performative posture. People who are trying to look confident often overcorrect. They thrust their chest out, pull their shoulders back so hard that they look stiff and armored, and hold their body in a rigid military way that reads as tense rather than strong. Real confident posture is relaxed. It is open. There is an ease to it. A quality of being naturally aligned rather than forcibly arranged. The difference between the two is immediately readable, even by people who could never articulate why one person makes them feel comfortable and another makes them feel vaguely on edge. Movement is the next layer. The way you move through space, not just how you hold your body when still, but how you travel from one place to another. How you gesture when you speak, how you turn your head, how you reach for things. All of this is a continuous broadcast of your inner state. Anxious people move quickly and in a fragmented way. Their movements are small, self-protective, and often self-soothing. They fidget. They touch their face. They cross and recross their legs. They make themselves physically smaller in whatever space they occupy. And again, these movements, most of which are entirely unconscious, communicate a state of internal agitation that the people around them cannot miss. The person with quiet confidence moves differently. Their movements are not rushed. They do not scramble or dart. They move with a kind of unhurried deliberateness, as if they are fully comfortable with the pace at which they are moving and have no anxiety about arriving anywhere before they are ready. They gesture in ways that are open and expansive rather than tight and restricted. They turn to face people fully rather than offering a sideways glance. They sit with their feet planted rather than crossed and locked. All of these physical behaviors taken together tell a story of a person who is at home in their own body and at ease in the world around them. There is also the question of how you enter and leave spaces. The moment of entering a room is one of the most socially loaded moments there is, because it is when you are most exposed and most visible, and when the people already in the room are most likely to register you and form an instant impression. Most people handle this moment by shrinking. They edge in, look for somewhere to hide, immediately check their phone, make themselves as unremarkable as possible. The quietly confident person does the opposite. They pause briefly, naturally, without theatrics. They take in the room rather than immediately trying to merge with it. They allow themselves a moment to arrive before they begin interacting. And that pause, that ease of entry, sets the tone for every interaction they will have in that space. Your hands deserve special attention because they are one of the most expressive and most watched parts of your body. People who are anxious tend to do things with their hands that they are entirely unaware of. They wring them together. They shove them in their pockets and keep them there like they are hiding evidence. They cross their arms, which not only closes off their body language but also restricts their breathing, or they gesture in choppy, uncertain ways that make their speech feel hesitant even when the words themselves sound fine. Quiet confidence uses the hands differently. It uses them openly to emphasize points with broad, calm gestures. It lets them rest naturally at the sides when not in use, which is one of the most powerful and least utilized postures available. It avoids the nervous habits not through suppression but through a growing comfort with stillness that makes the nervous habits simply unnecessary. The final dimension of physical communication worth addressing here is the quality of your touch. How you greet someone with a handshake. How you make or avoid incidental contact. Even how you hand something to another person. All of this contributes to the physical impression you leave. A firm, warm, full-handed handshake held for an appropriate moment and accompanied by eye contact creates an immediate sense of solidity and trustworthiness. A limp, brief, distracted handshake does the opposite. These are small things, but in the world of quiet confidence, small things are rarely actually small. They are the accumulation of signals that taken together create the impression that no single signal could create alone. Begin paying attention to your body today. Not to police it or to perform a new version of yourself, but to listen to what it is already saying. Because your body is honest. And when you begin to align it with the person you genuinely are and the person you are becoming, the impact on how the world receives you will be profound and immediate. Entirely without words. Chapter 7. Emotional Regulation. The Foundation of Quiet Authority. There is a quality that separates the people who command deep lasting respect from those who merely demand it. And it is not intelligence or talent or even accomplishment. It is the ability to remain emotionally regulated in moments when most people fall apart. It is the capacity to feel the full force of a difficult emotion. Whether that is anger, humiliation, fear or frustration, and to choose your response rather than being hijacked by it. It is in the simplest possible terms the ability to be moved without losing your footing, and it is one of the rarest and most powerful qualities a human being can develop. Most people have no real relationship with their emotions. They are either suppressing them, pushing them down out of sight because they have been taught that emotions are weakness, or they are at the total mercy of them, reacting to every feeling as if it were an order, escalating in moments of conflict, collapsing in moments of vulnerability, erupting when pushed, or shutting down when hurt. Neither of these is emotional regulation. Suppression is not regulation, it is avoidance. And reactivity is not authenticity. It is a loss of control dressed up as feeling. Real emotional regulation is something entirely different. It is the practiced ability to be with what you feel, to understand it, to let it inform you without letting it run you, and to choose your next move from a place of clarity rather than turbulence. This matters profoundly in the context of quiet confidence because emotional regulation is the internal mechanism that makes all the other qualities possible. You cannot maintain stillness if you are flooded with unprocessed emotion. You cannot use silence as power if anxiety is screaming at you to fill it. You cannot speak with genuine authority if your words are being driven by defensiveness or the need for approval. Everything we have discussed, the presence, the posture, the measured speech, the steady eye contact, all of it lives or dies on the foundation of how well you can manage what is happening inside of you. Think about what emotional dysregulation looks like in practice. Someone says something critical in a meeting and the person who lacks regulation flushes, raises their voice, makes a defensive comment they immediately regret and spends the next hour replaying the moment in their head, which further deteriorates their ability to be present. Or consider the person who, when they feel challenged or disrespected, goes cold and silent in a punishing way, withdrawing all warmth as a form of retaliation. Or the person who, when they are hurt, cycles through anger and self-pity and victimhood in a way that exhausts everyone around them. These are all forms of emotional dysregulation, and they all share a common outcome. They transfer the person's internal chaos to the external environment, creating instability in every interaction they have. Now consider the opposite. The person who, when challenged in that same meeting, pauses, takes a breath so subtle no one else registers it, and responds calmly, directly, without defensiveness, without escalation, and without the need to win. The person who, when hurt, can say clearly and without drama what they are feeling, and can do so in a way that opens a door rather than slamming one. The person who, when under enormous pressure, becomes more present rather than more frantic. That person, that quality is immediately recognizable as something exceptional. And the word most people reach for when they describe someone like that is not emotional or controlled. The word they reach for is powerful. This is because emotional regulation is not an absence of feeling. This cannot be overstated. Quietly confident people are not people who do not feel things. In many cases they feel them more deeply than others. What they have developed is the capacity to feel without being controlled by the feeling. To hold the emotion in awareness rather than being submerged by it. To be the observer of their inner experience rather than the prisoner of it. And this capacity, this separation between feeling and response, is where all real authority lives. The neuroscience behind this is worth understanding. When you encounter something stressful or threatening, whether it is a physical danger or a social challenge, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires. It triggers the stress response. Adrenaline, cortisol, heightened physical arousal, a narrowing of attention. This is the primal system. And it is fast. It acts before the thinking part of your brain. The prefrontal cortex has time to evaluate what is happening. This is why your heart is already racing before you have consciously registered why you are afraid. And in moments of high emotional activation, when the alarm system is fully engaged, your access to rational thought, careful decision-making, and nuanced communication is severely reduced. The part of your brain that makes you wise is partially offline. Emotional regulation is essentially the practice of keeping your prefrontal cortex in the conversation of developing enough awareness and enough of a gap between stimulus and response that the thinking brain can catch up with the feeling brain. Techniques like controlled breathing, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system and sends a signal of safety to the body, are not small or trivial interventions. They are direct neurological tools that restore access to your best thinking in moments when your worst thinking is trying to take over. But developing genuine emotional regulation goes deeper than technique. At the root of most emotional dysregulation is unprocessed material, old wounds that never healed, beliefs about yourself that are not true but feel true, especially under pressure. Patterns formed in childhood around how you were supposed to handle big feelings. Patterns that were necessary once and are destructive now. These roots are where the real work happens. Because when you do that deeper work, when you examine and begin to heal the places where your emotional reactivity is rooted, the surface techniques become almost unnecessary. You do not need to white-knuckle your way through a difficult conversation because the thing inside you that used to erupt has been seen, acknowledged, and integrated. You are not suppressing anything. You have simply become roomier, more capable of holding complexity without it overwhelming you. The practical expression of high emotional regulation in daily life is unmistakable. It looks like hearing criticism without crumbling, disagreeing without escalating, receiving good news without losing composure to elation that makes poor decisions easier. Being in an environment of high emotion, other people's panic, anger, or grief without being pulled into it while still being genuinely present with it. It looks like the leader who in a moment of crisis becomes quieter rather than louder. The parent who in the face of their teenager's rage responds with curiosity rather than matching fire. The person who when provoked does not take the bait. These are not superhuman feats. They are the natural expression of someone who has done the internal work of building regulation from the inside out. And perhaps the most important thing to understand about emotional regulation in the context of quiet confidence is this. Your emotional state is contagious. The people around you are constantly unconsciously calibrating their own emotional state against yours. If you are anxious, the people near you become more anxious. If you are defensive, the room becomes more defensive. But if you are calm, grounded, and regulated, something remarkable happens. The people around you begin to regulate themselves against your steadiness. They settle, they open, they trust, not because you said anything to earn that trust. Simply because your regulated presence communicated to their nervous systems that there is no threat, that things are manageable, that they are safe. That is what quiet authority actually is. Not the authority of position or of volume or of dominance. The authority of someone whose inner world is sufficiently ordered that other people's inner worlds naturally orient toward them for stability. That is the deepest and most enduring form of respect. And it begins not with anything you do or say, but with the quality of relationship you have with your own emotional experience. Chapter 8. The Danger of Seeking Approval. There is a version of yourself that many people know very well. It is the version that edits what you are about to say before you say it. Running it through an internal filter asking, will they like this? Will this make me sound foolish? Will this change how they see me? It is the version that changes its opinion depending on who is in the room. That laughs a little too enthusiastically at jokes that are not that funny, agrees with things it does not actually believe, and softens truths that need to be told because the potential discomfort of honesty feels too costly. This version of you is not dishonest. It is just terrified. Terrified of being seen and found lacking. Terrified that if people knew the real unedited, fully honest version of you, they would not choose to respect it. This is the trap of approval seeking, and it is one of the most comprehensive destroyers of genuine respect that exists because it creates a perfect paradox. The more desperately you seek approval, the less likely you are to receive real respect. And the moment you stop needing approval, the more naturally and powerfully it comes. Understanding why this paradox exists requires looking at what approval seeking actually communicates. When you adjust yourself to please others, when you monitor their reactions and edit your behavior based on what seems to be landing well, you are essentially broadcasting to them that their opinion of you is the thing that determines your worth. And people pick this up. They may enjoy the validation of being agreed with. They may appreciate that you seem so easy to get along with. But at a deeper level, they do not respect you more for it. They respect you less because what they are feeling beneath their surface satisfaction is the absence of something solid, the absence of an edge, something you could push against and feel resistance, something real and unmovable. And the thing is, we may enjoy mirrors, but we do not respect them. We respect things with substance. We respect things that do not shift every time we change our angle. This is not a small insight. It reframes the entire strategy most people use to try to earn respect. Almost everything the approval seeker does is designed to minimize friction, to smooth over differences, to be as unoffensive and accommodating as possible. And the result is that they become invisible in a very particular way. Not invisible because nobody notices them, but invisible because nobody is quite sure who they actually are. Because the version they present changes too much depending on the audience. And in the absence of a consistent, honest, self-defined identity, people fill in the gaps with whatever they want, which is never as powerful or as interesting as the truth. Consider what happens on the inside. When you are operating from a constant need for approval, you are never fully present in any conversation because part of your attention is always devoted to monitoring the other person's reaction, interpreting it and adjusting your behavior accordingly. You are split, and that split attention not only makes you less perceptive, less creative, and less genuinely connected, it also makes you exhausting to be around in ways people feel but cannot name. There is something slightly effortful about the interaction, something slightly performative, something that never fully relaxes because you are never fully relaxed. Because relaxation would mean risking the real you, and the real you might not get approved of. The cost of this way of living is enormous. Not just in terms of how others perceive you, though that cost is real. The deeper cost is to your relationship with yourself. When you consistently prioritize other people's approval over your own honest experience, you send yourself a message over and over and over again that says, what I actually think and feel is less important than what other people think of what I think and feel. You train yourself to distrust your own perceptions, to doubt your own judgment, to look outside for the validation that can only ever be sustainably built from within. And the longer you do this, the more lost you become to yourself until one day you realize you are not even sure what you actually believe. Because you have been curating your beliefs for an audience for so long that the unperformed version is genuinely hard to locate. Breaking free from approval seeking is not about becoming indifferent to others or deciding that relationships and how you are received do not matter. They do matter. Human beings are social creatures, and the desire to be seen and valued is not weakness. It is deeply human. The distinction is between wanting to be valued for who you genuinely are versus needing to be approved of no matter who you pretend to be. The first is healthy. The second is a prison. The path out begins with a single quietly radical act, forming an opinion and stating it even when you are not sure the room will applaud it. This sounds simple and feels terrifying the first time you do it deliberately. You say what you actually think instead of what you calculate the other person wants to hear. And for a moment there is exposure, a vulnerability, a beat where you do not know how it will land. And then one of two things happens. Either they agree, which is fine, or they do not, which is also fine because you are still standing. Nothing catastrophic occurred. The relationship did not shatter. The world did not end. And something in you that needed that proof gets it for the first time from the inside. This is how you build the tolerance for your own real self that makes approval seeking unnecessary. Not all at once, incrementally. One honest statement at a time. One disagreement gently held. One moment of not laughing at something that is not funny. One instance of saying I see it differently and discovering that the sky does not fall. Over time, the cumulative weight of these small acts builds into something solid, an identity that does not need external cosigning to feel real, and a presence that other people experience as grounded, trustworthy, and genuinely powerfully itself. The world is full of people telling you what you want to hear because they are hoping you will do the same for them. What is rare and what is deeply respected is the person who tells the truth with warmth, who holds their position without aggression, who is entirely willing to be disagreed with because their sense of self does not depend on being agreed with. That person is not trying to impress anyone. And because of that, they are impressive. Not despite their indifference to approval, but because of it. The moment you stop needing the room's permission to be yourself, you become the most interesting person in it. Chapter 9. Boundaries without explanation. There is a version of setting a boundary that most people know. It involves a long preamble of justification. It is careful and apologetic. It over-explains. It builds a legal case for the position it is taking in hopes that the other person will rule in its favor. It says, I am so sorry to bring this up, and I know this might be inconvenient, and I completely understand if you see it differently. But I was wondering if maybe it would be possible, if it is not too much trouble, that perhaps we could. And somewhere in there, buried under all that hedging and qualification, is the actual boundary. But by the time it arrives, it has been so thoroughly undermined by the anxiety that surrounded it that it barely registers as a limit at all. It registers as a request, a hopeful suggestion, a soft preference that the other person can take or leave based on how much they feel like honoring it. This is what most people think setting a boundary looks like. And it is one of the clearest signals of internal insecurity available because the over-explanation does not protect the boundary. It erodes it. Every apology, every qualifier, every cushioning phrase says the same thing. I am not fully sure I have the right to say this, and I need you to give me permission, and people can feel that uncertainty in you, and if they are the kind of person who does not respect other people's limits, they will use that uncertainty as an invitation to push further. The quietly confident person sets limits differently. They do it with warmth and without apology. They do it clearly, directly, and with a notable absence of the kind of anxious over-explanation that announces beneath its words that the person saying it is not fully sure they mean it. They do not build a case. They do not negotiate their own worth. They simply state what works for them and what does not. And they hold that position with a calm that tells everyone in the vicinity that this is not up for debate. Not because they are rigid or unkind, but because they know themselves well enough to know what they need, and they respect themselves enough not to apologize for it. This quality, the ability to hold firm limits without drama and without justification, is one of the most powerful things a person can communicate about themselves. It tells people that you know your own value, that you have a clear sense of who you are and what you will and will not participate in. That you are not available to be molded or overridden by someone else's preferences or pressure. And paradoxically, this quality invites more respect, not less. Because when people cannot easily move you off your position, they take your position more seriously. When you are not scrambling to accommodate everyone, people do not feel the faint contempt that can arise when accommodation seems unlimited. They feel instead that they are in the presence of someone with genuine substance. Let us be honest about why most people overexplain their limits. It is fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of being seen as difficult or unreasonable. Fear of disappointing someone and having that disappointment mean something terrible about you. Fear that if you simply say no without softening it into a pillow of apologies, the relationship will not survive it. And beneath all of that fear is a belief, usually installed very early in life, that your right to have needs at all depends on the willingness of others to grant that right. That your worth is contingent. That you must earn the permission to take up space by being maximally useful, agreeable, and undemanding. That belief is a lie. And every time you act from it, every time you overexplain or apologize for a reasonable limit, you reinforce it. You tell yourself again that your needs are not self-evidently valid, and the cost of that belief is paid not just in the disrespect of others but in the deepening erosion of your own self-respect. Holding a limit calmly and without a dissertation is not coldness. It is not unkindness. It is one of the most honest and self-respecting things you can do. And when it is done from a place of genuine groundedness rather than passive aggressiveness or punishment, it creates something remarkable in the relationship. It creates clarity. The other person knows where you stand. They know what they can expect from you. They do not have to guess whether you mean it or whether you can be talked out of it. And that clarity, while it may occasionally disappoint people, ultimately produces more respect than endless accommodation ever could. There are several things worth remembering when it comes to the practice of holding limits quietly and firmly. The first is that you do not owe anyone an explanation for protecting your own energy. Your time, your emotional well-being, are your values. A simple no delivered with warmth and without malice is a complete sentence. The second is that the discomfort of saying no clearly and without apology is temporary. The discomfort of having said yes when you meant no, of having betrayed your own limits to keep someone else comfortable, is far longer lasting and far more corrosive. The third is that how people respond to your limits tells you something essential about whether they respect you or only value your compliance. The person who responds to a clear, kind limit with anger or pressure is not respecting you as a person. They are respecting the version of you that gives them what they want. And that distinction is worth knowing. Begin practicing this in low-stakes situations before you need it in high-stakes ones. Notice when you say yes but mean no. When you offer 5 sentences of justification for a decision that required 1. When you apologize for having a preference. And in those moments experiment with a simpler, more direct version of the same thing. Not harsh, not cold, just honest and unhesitating. You will find that the world does not end. That most people, when they encounter a limit that is stated with genuine confidence and genuine warmth, simply accept it. Sometimes they appreciate it because there is something in all of us that recognizes and respects the person who knows who they are and is not afraid to say so. Limits held calmly and clearly are not walls. They are the architecture of self-respect. And in a world that is constantly testing how much it can ask of you, they are also one of the quietest, most powerful statements of identity available. Chapter 10. The Power of Slowing Down. Speed is one of the great imposters of our time. We have been trained collectively and individually to associate speed with competence. The person who answers fastest must know the most. The person who moves through tasks at the highest velocity must be the most capable. The person who can fill every moment with productive activity must be the most valuable. And as a result, we have become a culture of people who are almost incapable of slowing down. Not because slowing down would actually make us less effective, but because it would make us feel momentarily less important, less busy, less in demand. And in a world where busyness has become a status symbol, that feeling is almost intolerable. The problem is that speed, unchecked and constant, is one of the primary enemies of the kind of quiet confidence that commands real respect. Because speed, when it becomes the default setting rather than a deliberately chosen gear, signals something very specific to the people around you. It signals reactivity. It signals that you are being driven by something. Urgency, anxiety, the need to prove yourself, the fear that if you slow down, something will be revealed in the space you create. And while these signals are unconscious, they are picked up instantly by the people who interact with you. Something just slightly off, something that makes them trust you a little less, listen to you a little less carefully. Wonder at some level whether what you are projecting has genuine depth behind it. The person with quiet confidence moves through the world at a different pace. Not slow in a way that is ineffective or lethargic. Deliberate in a way that radiates command. There is a quality of purposefulness to how they move, how they speak, how they respond that makes every action feel chosen rather than compelled. And that distinction between chosen action and compelled reaction is where authority lives. Consider the pace at which you speak. This is one of the most immediately noticeable dimensions of your presence. People who feel anxious or insecure tend to talk quickly. The speed serves several unconscious functions. It fills silences before they can become threatening. It outpaces the internal critic that might otherwise intervene and second-guess what is being said. It projects a kind of busyness that can look at a surface level like enthusiasm or intelligence. But at a deeper level, speaking too quickly makes it harder for others to absorb what you are saying. It communicates that you are uncertain your words will be welcome. So you are getting them out before anyone has a chance to stop you. And it denies both you and the listener the space that meaning requires to actually land. Slowing down your speech is one of the simplest, most immediately powerful changes you can make to how you are perceived. When you speak more slowly and more deliberately, several things happen at once. Your words become clearer. The person listening has time to actually receive what you are saying rather than scrambling to keep up. The natural pauses you create give weight to what came before and anticipation to what comes next. And something about the pace itself signals to everyone in earshot that you are not in a rush to prove anything. That you trust your words to land. That you are not afraid of the silence between them. All of which reads as confidence of a particularly solid and unperformative kind. The same principle applies to physical movement. The person who is always hurrying, always in a rush, always moving with a slightly frantic quality is constantly communicating a low-level state of emergency. And while they may believe they are projecting capability and busyness, what they are actually projecting is stress. Contrast this with the person who walks at a measured, unhurried pace. Who turns to face things rather than glancing at them on the way past. Who sits down fully rather than perching on the edge. Who finishes one thing before moving to the next without the frantic energy of someone afraid of what will happen if they pause. That person, by moving as if time is not chasing them, communicates something about their relationship with the world that is deeply impressive. That they are in charge of their own tempo. That nothing external is driving them faster than they have chosen to go. This relationship with pace extends into how you make decisions. One of the most common expressions of anxiety is the rush to decide. When we are insecure, we want the uncertainty to end as quickly as possible. So, we respond before we have fully thought. We commit before we have fully assessed. We close the loop before the loop has had time to reveal what was in it. And this rush to resolution, while it temporarily relieves anxiety, almost always produces worse outcomes and communicates to others that you are driven by feeling rather than by judgment. The quietly confident person makes decisions on their own timeline, not recklessly, slowly, as if indecision were a virtue, but deliberately. They gather information. They sit with complexity rather than collapsing it prematurely. They say, "I will need some time to think about that," and mean it without apology. And when they arrive at a decision, It carries a quality of solidity that rushed decisions almost never have, because you can feel when you are the recipient of a decision like that it has been genuinely considered, that there is thinking behind it, that the person who made it is not going to change their mind under pressure because their mind was already fully made. Slowing down also changes the quality of your attention. When you are moving through life at full speed, your perception narrows. You see what you need to see to navigate the immediate moment and not much else. You miss the subtler signals, the shift in someone's expression, the unspoken tension in a room, the opportunity that is sitting quietly off to the side while you are racing past it. The person who moves deliberately, who is not perpetually in hurry mode, has access to a fuller picture of what is happening around them. And that fuller picture makes them more perceptive, more responsive, more able to read situations accurately and act on them wisely. In every dimension of life, slowing down is not a retreat. It is not passivity or complacency or low ambition. It is the choice to operate from a center that is stable enough to not need to be in constant motion to feel valid. It is the decision to let your pace be set by what the situation actually calls for, rather than by the background hum of anxiety that tells you if you stop moving you will be seen for what you are. Because here is what the person with quiet confidence has already discovered. There is no threat in the slowdown in the space you create when you stop rushing. You do not find emptiness or exposure. You find clarity. You find presence. You find the part of yourself that knows exactly what it is doing and is not in any hurry to prove it to anyone. Slow down, not because you have nowhere to be, but because you are already exactly where the most powerful version of you lives. Chapter 11. How to enter any room. Every room you walk into is a social experiment that begins the moment you cross the threshold. Before you shake a hand, before you speak a name, before you make any conscious social move, the experiment has already begun. Because the people in that room, whether 2 or 200, are wired to notice new arrivals. It is an evolutionary instinct, ancient and automatic, who just came in. Are they a threat or an ally? Are they someone worth engaging with? These assessments happen in the space of a few seconds below the level of conscious thought, and they are made almost entirely on the basis of how you enter, not what you say when you arrive. How you arrive. Most people handle the moment of entry in one of two ways. Both driven by anxiety. The first is the minimizer. They edge in. They keep close to the walls. They immediately check their phone or scan the room in a darting, anxious way that makes it clear they are not quite sure they belong there. Their whole physical presentation in that first moment is an apology. I know I am here and I am sorry to intrude. They make themselves as small and as unremarkable as possible, hoping to slip in without drawing too much attention, which means they typically draw exactly the attention they fear. Because evasion is readable and people notice the person who is trying not to be noticed in a way that is distinct from simply not being noticed. The second response to entry anxiety is overcompensation. The person who comes in loudly, who announces their presence with excessive volume or exaggerated energy, who makes a performance of arriving, trying to project a confidence they do not feel by turning their discomfort into spectacle. This too broadcasts insecurity, because real confidence does not need spectacle. It does not need to make an entrance. It simply enters. The person with quiet confidence does something that looks to the untrained eye almost unremarkable. But it is in fact one of the most socially powerful things a person can do. They pause briefly, naturally, just inside the entrance. They stand still for 1 or 2 seconds and they take in the room. Not scanning anxiously, not performing, just looking with a quality of unhurried ease that says they are entirely comfortable being visible in this moment. That they are not rushing to merge into the environment because there is no urgency driving them. They are simply arriving fully before they begin moving. That pause does several things simultaneously. It gives you a moment to orient, to see who is there, to get a read on the room before you commit to a direction. It signals to everyone who notices you entering that you are not in a hurry, which is one of the first and most fundamental signals of confidence. And it creates a beat of visibility, a moment in which people can see you and register you before you move toward them. which means the first impression they form is of someone who arrived with composure rather than someone who scrambled in after the pause. The movement matters. The quietly confident person moves with deliberateness, not stiffly, not slowly, in a way that feels theatrical, just without the slightly frantic quality that anxious people carry in their walk. They move toward their destination, whether that is a person, a group, or a seat, as if they have decided to go there. Not drifting, not shuffling, decided. And there is an enormous difference in how decided movement reads compared to undecided movement. Decided movement signals purpose and ease. Undecided movement signals hesitation and self-consciousness. The direction of your attention as you move also communicates a great deal. The person who moves through a room looking at the floor or studying their phone or staring straight ahead with a fixed gaze that makes it clear they are avoiding eye contact with the people they pass is communicating unavailability. They are closed. In contrast, the person who moves through a room with their gaze open and warm, who makes brief natural eye contact with people they pass, who gives a small nod or a half smile to someone they catch looking at them, is communicating something entirely different. They are saying, "I see you and I am not afraid to be seen." And that openness, that willingness to engage even in a glance, creates a warmth that people remember without always knowing why. When you reach the person or group you are going to engage with, the greeting is the first verbal and physical impression you make, and it either confirms or undermines what your entry communicated. A greeting built on quiet confidence is warm but not effusive. It is direct but not aggressive. It is the greeting of someone who is genuinely glad to be there but is not performing gladness. The handshake, if that is the cultural norm, is full and firm and brief without being abrupt. The eye contact is immediate and steady. The first words are unhurried. All of this adds up to a greeting that people will describe afterward as real or warm or easy to be around, which is exactly the social impression that quiet confidence creates. There is another dimension of entering any room that deserves attention, and it is the internal state you bring with you before the door even opens. Most of the anxiety around entering social spaces is generated not in the room but in the minutes before you enter. The rehearsing of scenarios, the anticipating of judgments, the running of worst-case simulations. All of this pre-room anxiety arrives with you through the door and shapes every physical signal your body sends in those critical first seconds. If you arrive having spent 5 minutes catastrophizing, your body will broadcast that state whether you are aware of it or not. The practice then begins before the room. It begins with the breath taken deliberately before you enter, with the physical grounding. Feeling the weight of your feet on the floor, the steadiness of your spine, with the quiet internal acknowledgement that whatever is on the other side of that door is manageable. Not because you have prepared a perfect performance, but because you are fundamentally okay regardless of how the next hour goes. That internal okayness is the thing that quiet confidence is made of. And when you carry it into a room, you do not need to announce it. Every person you pass will feel it. The world does not give its deepest respect to the person who arrives most loudly. It gives it to the person who arrives most fully. The person who walks in so completely themselves, so unhurried and so at ease in their own presence that the room adjusts itself slightly to accommodate them. Not because they demanded it, because they simply did not need anything from the room in order to feel at home in it. Chapter 12. Deep listening is a form of power. In a world saturated with noise, everyone is talking and almost no one is truly listening. Conversations have become increasingly sequential performances. Two people waiting for their turn at the microphone, half present in what the other person is saying, and half composing their next contribution. We have mistaken the appearance of listening for the thing itself. We make eye contact and nod and say, and we tell ourselves that counts. But the person across from us knows. On some level, they always know. They can feel the difference between being truly heard and being politely waited for. And that difference matters more than most people understand. Deep listening is not a passive act. It is one of the most active, demanding and powerful things one human being can offer another. It requires you to set down your own agenda, your own need to contribute or impress or redirect the conversation, and to be entirely genuinely present with what the other person is saying. Not just the words, but the meaning beneath the words, the emotion underneath the meaning, the thing they are trying to say that they have not quite found language for yet. To listen at that depth is rare. And when someone encounters it, when they find themselves in the presence of a person who is truly fully listening, the impact is immediate and profound. People who have experienced this describe it as one of the most intimately powerful social experiences available. They say that the person listening made them feel more understood in 10 minutes than people they have known for years. They use words like seen and heard and safe, and they describe a quality of trust and connection with that listener that grew very quickly and remained very strong. None of this was the result of what the listener said. It was the result of what the listener did not do, did not interrupt, did not wait impatiently, did not redirect, did not offer unsolicited advice, did not make the conversation about themselves. They simply listened completely. The power of deep listening in the context of quiet confidence is multi-layered. At the most surface level, it is enormously effective because it is so rare in a world of people hungry to be heard. The person who genuinely hears them becomes immediately remarkable. They do not need to say anything brilliant. They do not need to have the best opinion or the sharpest analysis. They simply need to be completely present with the person who is speaking. And that presence will be remembered and cherished in a way that nothing else quite matches. But the power goes deeper than effectiveness. Deep listening is also at its core an expression of inner security. Think about what is required of you to listen without interrupting. You have to be secure enough in yourself that you do not need to constantly insert your own voice to feel relevant. You have to be patient enough that you can sit with another person's complexity without rushing to resolve it or redirect it. You have to be genuinely curious about another person's experience rather than primarily interested in being interesting to them. All of these requirements point to the same internal foundation. A person who is not driven by the need to be seen, validated, or impressive. A person who is secure enough to disappear temporarily into genuine interest in someone else. That kind of security is magnetic. People feel it is a form of generosity, which it is. The gift of your full undivided attention given freely and without an ulterior motive is one of the most valuable things one person can offer another. And the people who receive it consistently, who can always count on you to really listen when they speak to you, will trust you deeply and respect you profoundly without you ever having to ask for either. Understanding what deep listening actually requires will help you practice it more intentionally. The first requirement is the quieting of your own internal noise. Most of the time while another person is talking, there is a parallel track running in your own mind. You are evaluating what they are saying, comparing it to your own experience. Formulating your response, judging whether you agree, planning what story of yours you will share when they are finished. All of this internal activity takes you out of the room. It takes you away from the person, and the gap it creates between your physical presence and your actual attention is something the person speaking can feel even when they cannot name it. Quieting that internal track does not mean switching your mind off. It means redirecting your attention. Instead of listening to yourself thinking about what they are saying, you listen to them. You notice the rhythm of their speech, the places where they pause, the words they emphasize, the shift in tone when they get to the part that matters most to them, the small hesitations that suggest they are approaching something vulnerable or uncertain. All of this is available to you if your attention is directed outward rather than inward. And all of it gives you information that makes your eventual response more resonant, more accurate, more genuinely helpful than anything your internal commentary track could have produced. The second requirement of deep listening is the suspension of the impulse to fix. This is especially important for people who have strong problem-solving instincts, which includes most high-functioning competent people. When someone shares something difficult, something painful or complicated or unresolved, the impulse to offer a solution is almost reflexive. We want to help, and helping in our minds means providing an answer, a suggestion, a path forward. But most of the time when someone is sharing something hard with you, What they need first is not a solution. What they need is to feel that someone understands what they are going through. The solution, if it is wanted at all, comes later. The understanding must come first. Deep listeners understand this. They resist the fixing impulse. They let the person talk until they have finished saying what they came to say without steering them toward resolution before they are ready for it. And then, before offering any advice at all, they reflect back what they heard. Not pairing, not summarizing in a mechanical way, but genuinely acknowledging the emotional core of what was shared. I hear you saying that you feel like you have been invisible in that relationship. That sounds exhausting and lonely. This kind of reflection, when it is authentic, stops people cold because they realize they have been truly heard. And in that moment, something in them releases. The tension they brought into the conversation begins to soften because the thing they most needed to not be alone in their experience has just been given to them. The third requirement is curiosity. Genuine, unhurried curiosity about the other person. Not interrogation. Not the kind of question asking that is really a way of steering the conversation toward where you want it to go, but real wondering. Who is this person? What is their experience of this situation? What do they mean when they say that? What does this feel like from inside their world? Questions that come from that place of genuine curiosity are received entirely differently from questions that come from agenda. People feel the difference immediately. A curious question opens them up. An agenda-driven question makes them slightly guarded. And the person who can ask genuinely curious questions and then sit in patient, unhurried silence waiting for the answer has one of the most powerful social tools available. There is one final thing about deep listening that is worth understanding, and it concerns what you communicate about yourself without saying anything about yourself. When you listen to someone deeply, you reveal your character. You show that you are not self-absorbed, that you are emotionally secure enough to be interested in someone other than yourself, that you value what this person has to say, that you are not in a hurry to get to the part where you talk. All of these things are communicated by your listening, not by anything you say. And they create an impression of you that is more attractive, more trustworthy, and more respected than any self-promotion could create. In every great relationship, whether personal or professional, at the center of it, you will find someone who knew how to listen, not someone who knew the right things to say, someone who made the other person feel genuinely, consistently, and deeply heard. That is the gift. That is the power. And it costs nothing but your full attention. Chapter 13. Integrity. When nobody is watching, there is a version of integrity that most people practice. It is the integrity of the audience. The version that shows up when people are watching, when reputation is on the line, when the consequences of dishonesty are visible and immediate. Most people manage this version reasonably well. They keep promises they know will be checked on. They treat people fairly when those people have the power to respond. They uphold their stated values when the stage lights are on and the room is full. This kind of integrity is not worthless, but it is not the foundation of quiet confidence, and it is not what earns the kind of deep, lasting respect we have been talking about throughout this journey. The integrity that matters. The integrity that quietly confident people are known for, whether they are ever recognized for it or not, is the integrity of the dark. The choices you make when no one is watching. The commitments you keep when no one would know if you broke them. The way you treat people who have no power to reward or punish you. The standard you hold yourself to when holding it costs you something and letting it slide would cost you nothing. That is where character is actually revealed. And it is where the quiet confidence that commands real deep respect is actually built. Consider what happens internally when you compromise your integrity in the absence of an audience. You tell yourself a small lie just to avoid a difficult conversation. You take a shortcut that technically no one will notice. You treat someone who cannot benefit you with a fraction of the care you would give someone who can. You make a commitment to yourself privately and then quietly let it go because there is no external pressure to keep it. Each of these moments is small on its own. But each one is also a transaction, an exchange in which you trade a small piece of your relationship with yourself for a small piece of comfort or convenience. And the currency being spent in these trades is something you cannot easily recover, because what is being eroded is your own trust in yourself. This is the thing most people do not understand about integrity. They think of it primarily as an ethical principle, a matter of doing right by others. And it is that, but it is also, and perhaps more fundamentally, a matter of doing right by yourself. Because every time you act in alignment with your values, even when you could get away with not doing so, you send yourself a message. You tell yourself, I am the kind of person who does what they said they would do. Who is the same whether or not anyone is watching. Who does not need external accountability to hold the standard, because the standard is internal. And that message, compounded across hundreds and thousands of small private moments, builds something in you that no external achievement could build. It builds genuine self-respect, and genuine self-respect is the bedrock on which all authentic confidence is built. The reverse is also true, and it is important to understand it clearly. Every compromise of private integrity, every moment when you allow yourself to be a slightly different person in the dark than you were in the light, chips away at that internal foundation. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently. Like water finding the crack in stone over time. The person who habitually compromises their integrity in private begins to feel at a level below conscious thought that they are not fully trustworthy. That the version of themselves they present to the world is a curated performance rather than a genuine expression. And that feeling, even when it is never verbalized, shows. It shows an equality of slight guardedness, a subtle lack of ease in their own skin, a need to manage perceptions that is just slightly too active to be explained by ordinary social awareness. People cannot always put their finger on what it is, but they feel the inauthenticity and they trust less. Integrity when no one is watching also involves the way you speak about people who are not present. This is one of the most revealing tests of character available, and it operates in the background of almost every social interaction. The person who speaks well of others when those others are not in the room. Who refuses to participate in gossip or condemnation of people who are not there to represent themselves demonstrates a quality of steadiness that is deeply noticed, because everyone in the room registers the same unspoken thought. If they talk about people this way when those people are absent, what do they say about me when I am not here? The person who can be trusted to speak of others with fairness and charity, whether or not those others will ever know, establishes a kind of social trustworthiness that is almost impossibly rare. And it radiates. It changes how people feel in your presence, how safe they feel, how willing they are to be open with you in ways that go far beyond any single conversation. There is also the integrity of your commitments to yourself. The promises you make to yourself about who you are going to be, how you are going to live, what standards you are going to hold. These private commitments are the foundation of the external confidence you project when you set an alarm to wake early and then actually wake when it goes off. When nobody is watching and your bed is warm and there is no external consequence for staying in it. You have kept faith with yourself. When you make a decision to handle a difficult situation with honesty and grace, and then in the actual moment you do it. Even though the easier path was right there, you have proved to yourself that you are who you say you are. And the accumulation of these private proofs over days and weeks and years creates an internal solidity that is unmistakable in a person. You can feel it the moment you are in their presence. There is something settled about them. Something that does not need to be announced because it is simply undeniably there. People with this quality do not need to tell you they are trustworthy. They do not need to remind you of their values or reassure you of their intentions. Everything about the way they move through the world already says it. And the respect this generates is the deepest kind, because it is not based on a performance. It is based on a read, an instinctive, accurate, below the surface read of someone who is the same person in every room, every context, every moment of visibility or invisibility. The work of building this kind of integrity is simple to describe and demanding to actually do. It means living by your values even when it is inconvenient, keeping your commitments even when you could quietly let them go, choosing honesty even when a comfortable evasion was available, treating every person you encounter with the same standard of care and respect regardless of what they can do for you. Not because anyone is watching, not because you will be rewarded, but because you have decided at some fundamental level that you will not be one kind of person in public and another in private. That the gap between your performed self and your real self will be as small as you can make it. And that the standard you live by will be internal, not external. That decision maintained consistently over time produces something that cannot be manufactured or performed or faked. It produces character, and character above all the other things discussed in this journey is the deepest and most enduring source of quiet confidence available. Chapter 14. Mastering the Pause. The pause is one of the most underestimated tools in the entire toolkit of human communication. We treat it as an absence, a gap, an accidental emptiness that needs to be filled as quickly as possible before it becomes awkward. And in doing so, we throw away one of the most potent instruments available for creating influence, conveying intelligence, and projecting the kind of unshakable composure that makes people stop and pay attention to you in a way that no amount of words ever quite achieves. Consider what a pause actually is. In music, it is not the absence of sound. It is sound held. It is the note that does not play but whose presence you feel because everything around it is shaped by its stillness. The greatest musicians will tell you that the pauses are as important as the notes. That it is in the silence between sounds that tension is created, emotion is held, and meaning is made. The same is true in human speech, in human interaction, in the entire landscape of how we communicate with one another. The pause is not nothing. The pause is everything that surrounds and gives weight to the something. Yet most people are so uncomfortable with silence in conversation that they will do almost anything to break it. They answer questions before they have finished being asked. They speak before they have decided what they want to say. They fill the space between the last thing that was said and the next thing that should be said with words that add no meaning, verbal filler, sounds and phrases and tangential observations that exist only to prevent the gap from opening. And in doing so, they betray every single time a discomfort with stillness that registers as a form of insecurity. Because the message underlying all that gap filling is always the same. I cannot afford to let this pause exist because I do not know what it will reveal about me. The person with quiet confidence uses the pause differently. When a question is asked, they do not rush to answer. They allow a beat to pass, a moment of genuine consideration before they speak. And this moment, which in clock time is rarely more than a second or two, does something remarkable to how their answer is received. It signals that they are thinking, that their response is being considered rather than spat out reflexively, that they value the quality of what they are about to say over the speed of its delivery. And the answer that follows that pause carries a weight and a credibility that an instant response almost never achieves. Think about the people in your life whose opinions you most respect. The ones whose counsel you seek in difficult moments. The ones whose words you find yourself remembering long after the conversation ended. Almost certainly these are people who take their time before they speak. Who do not seem to be in a hurry to fill the air with their thoughts, who speak when they have something to say and are comfortable not speaking when they do not. That selectivity, that willingness to let silence exist while they think, is inseparable from the authority their words carry. You cannot have one without the other. The weight of their speech is a direct product of the care they take in choosing it. The pause is also powerful as a response to provocation. When someone says something designed to destabilize you, whether that is a pointed criticism, a challenging question, an insulting remark, or a social power move intended to put you on the back foot, the instinctive response for most people is immediate defensive speech. They react. They defend, deflect, or escalate. And in doing so, they prove without meaning to that the provocation worked, that it found something, that it produced the reaction it was designed to produce. The pause does the opposite. When you meet provocation with a brief calm silence before responding, when you do not immediately take the bait, you demonstrate that you are not controlled by the external stimulus, that you are choosing your response. And the person who provoked you is left in the unusual and often unsettling position of having fired their shot and watched it land without detonating. Because the detonation they expected, the emotional reaction that would have given them leverage did not come. What came instead was stillness. And stillness in response to provocation is one of the most powerful things a person can experience. It communicates without a word. You do not have the power over me that you thought you had. There is also the use of the pause mid-spec, which the most effective communicators use as naturally as punctuation. Speaking without any pauses is exhausting to listen to. It gives the listener no time to absorb what is being said. It creates a pressured, breathless quality that makes the speaker seem unsure, as if they are afraid that if they stop for even a moment, someone will take the floor from them. In contrast, pausing mid-thought, holding a beat before delivering the key word or the most important idea, creates emphasis and anticipation in a way that verbal emphasis alone never quite matches. The pause tells the listener what is coming next matters. Pay attention. Developing your relationship with the pause begins with developing your tolerance for silence in lower stakes moments. Notice in your next conversation when the impulse to speak arises out of discomfort rather than genuine contribution. And in those moments experiment with letting the silence sit for just a breath longer than you normally would. Not indefinitely. Not in a way that creates confusion. Just long enough to experience that the pause does not destroy the conversation. Does not make you look stupid. Does not result in the social catastrophe that the anxiety was predicting long enough to discover that in the space of the pause. Something sometimes better rises to the surface than what your anxious impulse would have produced. With practice, the pause stops feeling like a gap that needs to be filled and starts feeling like a resource that can be used. A tool with as much intentionality and precision as any other communicative choice. The person who has mastered the pause speaks less and means more. They create a kind of attentive expectation around their speech that the constant talker will never create. When they speak, people lean in. Not because they are shouting, but because the silence that preceded their words has primed the room to receive them. The greatest speakers, the most respected leaders, the most quietly powerful presences in any room have all learned this. They are not louder than other people. They are more deliberate, more composed, more willing to let the space between words do its work, more comfortable in the silence that others are scrambling to escape. And that comfort, that settled relationship with stillness is read by every person in their presence as the unmistakable signature of someone who has nothing to prove, nothing to fear, and everything already in hand. Chapter 15. Living the Quiet Confidence, Making It Who You Are. We have covered a great deal of ground. We have explored the myth of loud confidence and the truth about what real authority looks and feels like. We have talked about presence and stillness and eye contact and posture and the art of saying less. We have gone deep into emotional regulation and the danger of seeking approval. We have examined the power of holding firm limits, of slowing down, of entering rooms with composure, of listening so deeply that people feel genuinely known. We have talked about integrity in the dark and the deliberate weighted use of silence. And all of these things are real. All of them work. All of them practiced consistently will transform how the world receives you and how you move through it. But there is something more important than any of them individually. And it is the question we must face now at the end of this journey. How do you make this not a collection of techniques but a way of being? How do you take what you have learned here and embed it so deeply into the architecture of who you are that it stops being something you do and becomes something you are? The answer begins with identity, not with behavior. Because here is what most self-improvement advice gets backwards. It starts with behavior and hopes identity will follow. Do the confident thing enough times and eventually you will feel confident. Speak more slowly and eventually you will feel calm. Hold eye contact long enough and eventually you will feel secure. And while there is some truth to the idea that behavior can influence internal state, the sequence is ultimately unreliable when it runs in only one direction. Because behavior that is not rooted in identity is performance and performances end. They are exhausting to sustain. They waver under pressure and people can feel the gap between the performance and the reality beneath it. The shift that makes quiet confidence lasting and real is not a behavioral shift. It is a decision about who you are, not who you will try to be, who you are right now in this moment. Before any external circumstance changes, before you have achieved everything you want to achieve, before the approval comes or the respect arrives or the world begins to treat you differently, the decision that you are a person who does not need to prove anything because you already know your value. The decision that you are someone who listens fully, who speaks deliberately, who holds firm limits, who moves through the world without urgency, not because these things produce good results, though they do, but because this is who you have chosen to be. This shift in identity is not a performance of confidence. It is the genuine adoption of a new self-concept. And the reason it matters so profoundly is that your subconscious mind, which governs the vast majority of your behavior, thinks and operates in terms of identity. It asks constantly in every situation, "What would a person like me to hear?" And whatever your answer to that question is, your subconscious will work tirelessly to make your behavior consistent with it. If your identity is someone anxious and seeking approval, your subconscious will find anxious approval-seeking behavior natural and automatic. If your identity is someone grounded and self-defined, your subconscious will make groundedness the path of least resistance. This is why the practice of quiet confidence must begin with a redefinition of self. Not "I am going to be more confident," but "I am someone who is already at ease in themselves." Not "I will try to stop seeking approval," but "I am someone whose sense of worth does not depend on other people's opinions." Not "I need to remember to slow down," but "I am someone who moves through the world at their own pace." These are not affirmations in the naive sense. They are identity statements, declarations to your own subconscious about who is in charge of your experience. And repeated consistently, lived actively, they reshape the internal landscape in ways that make all of the specific behaviors discussed throughout this journey feel not like disciplines to be maintained, but like natural expressions of who you genuinely are. The second piece of making quiet confidence a way of being rather than a set of techniques is the commitment to consistency. Consistency not in the sense of performing perfectly every day, because that is not what consistency means, and striving for perfect performance will exhaust and defeat you. Consistency in the sense of returning again and again to your values and your self-concept regardless of what knocked you off center, because you will be knocked off center. There will be days when the anxiety is loud and the stillness is hard to find. Days when you seek approval before you catch yourself doing it. Days when you speak too quickly or fill a silence you should have let breathe, or defend yourself more urgently than you needed to. These are not failures. They are the inevitable cost of being human in a complex world. The question is never whether you falter. The question is how quickly you return. The quietly confident person does not have a day without stumbles. What they have is a practice of noticing the stumble without catastrophizing it, understanding where it came from without drowning in self-judgment, and returning to their center without the dramatic detour through shame and self-criticism that most people take. This return is a skill, and it is built through exactly the same mechanisms as all the other skills discussed in this journey. Through doing it repeatedly until it becomes the natural response, until coming back to yourself after every disruption is as automatic as the disruption itself used to be. There is also the matter of environment. Who you surround yourself with has an enormous impact on the sustainability of quiet confidence, because human beings are deeply and unavoidably influenced by the emotional and behavioral norms of the people around them. If you are consistently surrounded by people who speak loudly and seek attention and measure their worth in external validation, the gravitational pull of those norms will work against everything you are building. Not because you are weak, because you are human. It is the nature of social organisms to attune to the standards of their group. This does not mean you must abandon everyone in your life who does not yet embody quiet confidence. It means you make deliberate choices about who you spend the most time with, whose voices you let influence your inner world most deeply, whose example you use to calibrate your own sense of what is normal. Seek out deliberately the company of people who are doing the inner work, who speak from a place of genuine security rather than performed certainty, who listen more than they talk, who can disagree with warmth and hold firm without rigidity. These people exist. They are not common, which is exactly why they are so recognizable when you find them. And time spent in their company will reinforce far more powerfully than any self-improvement content the identity you are choosing to inhabit. The final thing to understand about making quiet confidence a way of being is perhaps the most important, and it is something that all of the specific practices discussed in this journey point toward but do not fully articulate. The foundation of genuine quiet confidence is not self-improvement. It is self-acceptance. The two might seem like the same thing, or at least like close companions, but they are actually quite distinct. Self-improvement is focused on what you need to change about yourself. Self-acceptance is the recognition that you are already fundamentally and intrinsically enough. Not because you have achieved everything or healed everything or resolved everything, but because your value as a human being is not conditional on any of that. You do not need to earn the right to take up space. You do not need to become someone better in order to deserve respect. You deserve it now. And the moment you genuinely inhabit that truth, the moment it stops being an idea you hold and becomes a reality you live, everything about how you move through the world changes, because you can feel the difference when you encounter it in someone between confidence that is earned through achievement and confidence that is rooted in self-acceptance. The first is always slightly fragile, always dependent on the continued accumulation of proof. The second is unshakable because it is not built on anything external that can be taken away. It is built on the simple, settled, unargued knowledge that you are here. You are enough, and the world will meet you on those terms because you have already met yourself on them. This is the quiet confidence that commands rooms without demanding them. That earns respect without chasing it, that makes people lean in without being asked to. It is not a performance. It is not a set of tricks. It is the natural expression of a person who has done the work. Not just the external work of adjusting behaviors, but the deeper, quieter, more demanding internal work of deciding who they are and then living that decision every day in every room with every person, whether anyone is watching or not. That is who you are becoming.